Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sake Revolution. This is America's first sake podcast. I'm your host, John Puma, from the Sake Notes, also the administrator over at the Internet Sake Discord. Please do come join us sometime. And the Reddit guy, too. Most notably, though, not the Sake Samurai. That's the other guy.
That's me. I'm your other host, Timothy Sullivan. I am a Sake Samurai. I'm also a sake educator, as well as the founder of the Urban Sake website. And every week, John and I will be here tasting and chatting about all things sake and doing our very best to make it fun and easy to understand.
That is right, Tim. That is great. Now, I understand we're going on a bit of a journey today.
We're going up north.
We're going up north. All right. Yeah, so we're going to be doing our little deep dive. I love doing these little prefectural visits. These are always a lot of fun. I always get a kick out of them.
Yes.
But I'm especially excited because this was the site of my most recent, I don't want to say last, most recent visit to Japan.
Yes, you got in a trip to Japan right before the pandemic hit.
Right under the buzzer, Tim.
You lucky duck.
Yeah.
And where did you go on that trip?
I went to, we started our trip in Sapporo, which is in Hokkaido, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Hokkaido. Now, I always jokingly refer to Hokkaido as the Alaska of Japan. Does that make sense to you?
I get it. It's the coldest part by a country mile.
Furthest north?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny when I talk to people sometimes, and when I tell them, I went to Hokkaido, it was crazy, there was snow everywhere, they were like, all over in Japan, and like in the streets, there was just piles of snow? We're like, yeah. And because people think of Japan's climate as being kind of Tokyo. Right. And Tokyo's climate, and they don't think that. Well, no, it's a vertical country, and you can go quite north.
Yeah, and well, I refer to it as the Alaska of Japan, not only because it is much farther north than the rest of the country, but did you know it was also added on to the country later in history? Like it was not originally part of Japan and added later, just like Alaska was.
That definitely getting Alaska vibes from that.
Yes. Yeah, well, I've been to Hokkaido once in all my trips to Japan. I went to a city called Hakodate.
Oh, that where you went. Hakodate is the first city that you come across when you're going, south to north, I think, right?
Yeah, it's one of the major kind of gateway cities when you're coming up from the main island. I actually went there when I did my boat trip to Japan, that cruise I talked about, and we went to Hakodate, was the first stop in Japan coming from Alaska on the cruise ship. And that was our opening port for Japan. So we really enjoyed it. And the one thing I left remembering about Hakodate was seafood. The city is branded as seafood central. Even the manhole covers had squids on them, or crab or something, some seafood on the everywhere you look. So that's my lasting memory from that trip in 2009.
All right. My main memory or my goal, I guess, going to Sapporo was actually an annual snow festival they have every February, the Sapporo Snow Matsuri, the Yuki Matsuri. Yeah. And that was a whole lot of fun. They built these giant ice and snow sculptures, but in 2020, the snowfall was a little bit short of what they normally have. So they had to bus the snow from more northern areas of Hokkaido down into Sapporo so they can build the giant sculptures. It was quite amusing, but they were very, very, very intimidatingly large and very beautiful in a lot of cases. It was a lovely visit.
I think the snow festival in Sapporo is one of the most famous things in Hokkaido. Don't you think so? I mean, I've heard of it before, and I think it's really well known.
I don't know. I haven't heard a whole lot of things about Hokkaido, so it's one of the only things that I've heard about. I know that, and I know that if you go north enough, you can see the northern lights. And
ooh, I did not know that. That's awesome.
What I've heard. I hope I'm right. Somebody correct me. Send to feedback@sakerevolution.com and tell me that I'm wrong.
I think with enough sake, you'll see the northern lights.
I see a pattern developing with having sake and seeing things. But I'm glad that we went to different cities. We got maybe a little bit of a different vibe. It sounds like your experience was a little bit more seafood centric, and at
Yes.
Hakodate, being on the water
Yes.
was very much like, here's some crab.
Yeah, it's a major fishing port and a little bit of a tourist town, and not as big as Sapporo, obviously. And I remember having just an absolutely wonderful time and going to the fish market. And it was fun to visit a fish market. Like if you go to a major fish market in Tokyo, like Tsukiji used to be, it's very overwhelming and very dangerous with those trucks zipping by. But this was a much more chill, but still you got up close and personal with these giant crabs that looked like they could pinch your face off because they were like 10-foot wingspan crabs. Like
goodness.
they were insane. But the seafood we had there was just so good. And sometimes it's fun to visit a smaller town. You can get more up close and personal with things.
That sounds great. When we went to Sapporo, one of the major goals, at least for my shell, was miso ramen. Because that is overwhelmingly her favorite style of ramen, and that is where it's from. It's from Sapporo. They put a big old slab of butter in there when you
What?
when you get your ramen. It's
What?
butter, it's corn, it's vegetables, it's a salad on top of your ramen. That's a lot of stuff.
Well, I can get behind corn in ramen. That's one of my
How about
favorite
the butter?
things.
You all right with the butter?
I'm ready.
All right.
But I'm really curious to ask you about your sake adventures while you were in Sapporo. What happened? Did you find any good sake bars up there, or was it all
I have
just...
to say, walking down the street in Sapporo, if you just take out your phone and search for sake in Google Maps, you will find it's like the densest population of really great sake bars. I would see one, we'd pop into it, and it would be a wonderful, wonderful, fantastic experience with a different selection than everybody else, et cetera, et cetera. And everywhere we went, we just kept coming across these wonderful places. And there were so many more that we didn't even get to go to. But the one that sticks with me the most was the very first place we went to. It was called a Hokkaido Sake Bar Kamada. And the catch, I guess, at Kamada is all the food is made from Hokkaido ingredients, and all of the sake is from Hokkaido only. Like a lot of the other places, they're carrying, larger brands and, stuff from all over the country. But Kamada-san is very much focused on just Hokkaido stuff. And he has a lot of interesting and rare Hokkaido stuff, which was great. I always like finding, there's one of these bars in every prefecture that's got like the stuff from that prefecture. And that was our experience there. Kamada-san also speaks English, so that was very useful. And that's where I learned about the rices that they had there, a lot of detail about the profiles of a lot of the sakes that we were tasting that just make the whole visiting Japan experience a lot easier.
Fabulous. That sounds amazing. Yeah. I'm taking notes, John. This is going on my to-do list.
And it's going in the show notes too, not just your notes.
Yes, that's right.
And one of these days we'll be able to go back there and I'll visit Kamada-san again.
That sounds amazing.
It was a really nice place.
Yeah, I really like those types of bars that focus on something very specifically, because you can dive super deep in something you think you might know a little bit about, and I just love that.
Yeah. It was just a great time. And one of the first things that he told us was, and I guess this is just part of his, like, what he thinks that people who are into sake are really interested in hearing, and he was right, was that he's like, in Hokkaido, we have 3 major types of rices here. And he went on to name them: Ginpu, Suisei, and Kitashizuku, and then gave us sakes that used each one and had us compare them because they were all from the same brand. So it was like just one brewery that did a sake for each rice type, but the same milling percentage, the same everything else, just the different rices. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
That sounds great. And what a cool experience to taste those sakes side by side and kind of taste what the different rices bring to it. Very cool.
Yeah. And then, as you were pointing out, that's that kind of experience you get when you go to a place that's hyper focused.
Right. Well, Hokkaido is an interesting prefecture. It's the second largest island of the four main islands, so it has a lot of land mass. And I think if you ask the average person on the street in Japan what Hokkaido's all about, my vibe has always been that they think about it as like the breadbasket of Japan. It's got more open plains, and they have a lot of dairy there. It's really well known for butter. That's maybe where the butter comes from in your ramen.
Yeah, I was just thinking that myself. I was like, oh, wait a minute, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and it's cold. Very cold. Arctic cold.
It was February, so what was I expecting? But yes, it was very cold.
Yeah. Where I lived in Niigata, it snowed a lot, but it was a wet, heavy snow, and it didn't get as frigid. But when you're in Hokkaido, that's much farther north. You're really close to Siberia, actually, and you get really, really cold winds.
Yeah, we got very cold winds, and we got a ton of snow. I know I had mentioned that it had not been snowing enough for them to really make the statues, but the weekend of the festival, the temperatures plummeted, and we were a little bummed that maybe we weren't going to get snow weather when we were going to Sapporo. But the gods of Sapporo decided to help us out and give us the real Hokkaido experience. The snow was a different texture than I think I'd ever experienced. Also, it was a kind of like cornstarchy almost.
Ooh, very powdery.
So it was pretty dry, but it stuck to everything. So we get inside and our jackets are just like covered in snow, but we can't get it off. It's just like attached until it melts. It was very weird, very unusual.
Like crunchy texture snow, or
no? It was very soft. It was very unusual. It was like all the best qualities in snow in one flake. And then one other thing that we noticed when we were there is that there's so much snow that they really don't bother shoveling it in a lot of cases, because there's just too much. Like you're swimming against the stream, So a lot of the snow on the streets and on the sidewalks just becomes like packed ice.
Ooh, that sounds dangerous.
Yes. But everybody over there has shoes that are kind of built for that sort of thing. A lot of that. We went into a shoe store, and even like the dress shoes had these bottoms that were made to adhere to ice and snow very well. But for the people visiting like us, all the local konbinis, the convenience stores, all had these little rubber, little elastic strap-on treads that you can put on your shoes that would help you to not slip.
Only in Hokkaido.
Only in Hokkaido. And we saw quite a few people who did not have those treads, quite a few tourists wipe out horribly at a street light. As soon as the light turned green, they were like, okay, we're going. It was like, whoo! Luckily it was snow, so they kind of fell and they were okay.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you want to take a guess how many sake breweries roughly there are in Hokkaido?
I want to say there's fewer than one would think. Sake breweries, and often in cold places, cold climates are really good for sake. Hokkaido's the coldest place, but I think it's probably something closer to 30? Am I close?
We're talking 13.
13. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Roughly, I don't know the exact number, but it's around 13. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make a note of that. 13. That's one of those where if you really want to get ambitious, you can visit all of them in one prefecture.
Yeah. And just for comparison, the prefecture with the largest number of sake breweries is Niigata with 90. So that's just to give you a sense of scale there. Yeah.
Well.
All right. And, of those 13 breweries, there's one that I think is really very, very famous.
There is one that is very famous. And
really well known.
I think that when we were both getting introduced to sake for the first time, it was a very, very popular sake in New York.
Yes. John, what are we talking about?
We are talking about Otokoyama, Man's Mountain.
Man's Mountain. So, this brand from Hokkaido, Otokoyama, is one of the first really dry sakes that I think came over. They have a Junmai sake that's sold really well for many, many, many years.
Oh, yeah.
And as you were just mentioning, I think a lot of people who had experience with sake 15, 20 years ago, this was one of the main brands that was out there and really came to be, for a lot of people, I think maybe their first step into premium sake.
It was definitely one of the first sakes I had ever tried.
Yeah.
It was very approachable, very nice.
And affordable, too.
And affordable, yeah. Very much so.
Yeah. So you and I are both going to be drinking sakes from the Otokoyama brewery, but we're not drinking the Junmai that we just mentioned, the classic that's everywhere. People can go out and find that very readily. But you and I both have different sakes from this same brewery. So why don't we both briefly introduce the sakes that we brought to taste today? So, John, why don't you lead us off and let us know which Otokoyama sake do you have with you?
I have the Otokoyama Shiboritate Tokubetsu Junmai Nama Genshu.
Well, that's a mouthful.
It is. It is. This is the first sake they make for the year. It was bottled back in January. It is from Otokoyama, as you mentioned. The rice type is Ginpu, which is one of those exclusive Hokkaido sake rices. The rice polishing rate is 55%. The sake meter value is +2. And the acidity, 1.7. And as a Genshu, 17% alcohol.
That's getting up there.
It is.
Yeah. So for our listeners, should we go through the different terms in the name of your sake and give them a quick definition? Shiboritate Tokubetsu Junmai Nama Genshu?
I think a refresher course is in order.
Let's do it.
So, Shiboritate. So this is freshly pressed, bottled, and shipped right out.
Yep.
Tokubetsu Junmai. So Tokubetsu we talked about in the past means special. Junmai is your ground level for premium pure rice sake. And this is milled down to 55%. So that's where your Tokubetsu is coming in, I'm sure.
Yes, very Tokubetsu.
So they can call this a Junmai Ginjo if they wanted to, but they're going for Junmai probably for flavor purposes. And this is a Nama. This is not pasteurized at all.
Yep.
And it is a Genshu, which is where that 17% alcohol comes from because it is not diluted by water in the least. Or at least barely, if at all.
Yeah.
You may go back to our Genshu episode for why that's a funny joke.
Well, there is a lot going on in that sake.
There is.
We'll have to see how the flavor and aroma deliver on that.
Yeah.
But let me briefly introduce my Otokoyama sake. This is Kita no Inaho Daiginjo. This is, again, from our Otokoyama Shuzo in Hokkaido. Now, the rice type that I have for mine is one of those three famous Hokkaido rices you mentioned. This is Suisei. And the alcohol percentage here is 16%. The SMV is +1. The acidity is 1.2. So that's actually pretty low when you get down around 1.0. So that kind of might give it a softer impression. And then the rice polishing for my Daiginjo is 40% remaining. So the English name for this sake is Rice of Hokkaido.
Ooh, I like that. That's good.
Yes, and that must be referring to the Suisei.
Yeah, yeah.
Suisei is an interesting rice. It was adopted in 2006, so fairly recently. And it's a blending of two different strains of rice. Ginpu is one of the parents of this, and also Hatsushizuku.
All right. And in my case, with having my Ginpu rice, Ginpu was adopted in the year 2000. So I think all three of the sake rices from Hokkaido that we were talking about are millennials. They're all 2000, 2000. What do you have? Yours was 2006, and then the last one is 2014.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Hokkaido has been on the move with sake rice.
Yeah, they're making moves. I think then in the coming years we're going to see a surge in great sake coming from Hokkaido. I have a feeling. I'm excited about it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm also very excited about your 40% sake. We cannot keep you away from the daiginjos, can we?
Should I open it up?
Oh, yes, you should.
I took that as an invitation to open it, John.
It is there's an open invitation.
You set me up. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the aroma on this is an interesting blend of fruitiness and riciness. Mm-hmm. So even though it's 40% remaining, you might expect this to be some kind of velvety luxury daiginjo, but there is a strong aroma of rice balanced with fruit. So it's both coming across. And relatively intense aroma as well. So
Really?
It's not shy, not retiring, pretty forward, and I would describe this as a complex aroma for sure.
Oh, nice.
Now let me give it a taste. Interesting. So it has more of a rice flavor on the palate. Mm-hmm. The little hints of fruit that you get in the nose are not really present in the flavor. You get much more rice, and it is not as complex as the aroma as well. It's more straightforward, very smooth, but leaning more towards that food-friendly style that we often talk about here on the podcast, where it's more geared towards a type of sake that you really want to pair with richer style foods, and really unique, very smooth, as I said, but rice forward. And for a daiginjo, I really feel that this is not a junmai style. This has just a little bit of distilled alcohol added. So this is a daiginjo, very lightly fortified with distilled alcohol for texture. And you really can feel that in the texture. Very, very smooth, velvety texture. But the rice flavor is not to be denied. And since they call this the rice of Hokkaido, I think they had to ensure that that rice flavor would come across in the taste. And they've really accomplished that very well.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That sounds nice. I need to taste this sake at some point. Tim, save some for me.
Yeah. And the label, which you can see in the show notes, is also really cool.
I like
It
it.
has all these black raindrop shapes, which I think represent the grains of rice. So
Yeah,
that's a
really nice looking.
very, very nice label as well. Just such a fun sake, really cool. So John, now I'm super curious about, now you that type of sake I call the kitchen sink sake because it's got so many variables going on.
Yes.
So can't wait to get your description of this one.
Well, you had just talked about your label. I'm going to lead with my label because my
Let's
label
see yours.
is freaking adorable. So it's got this cute
my
he's a polar bear, and he's got a little ochoko. He's ready to have some sake.
It's very cute, people. It's very cute.
Label. It's in the running for like cutest labels, which another strong contender is Otokoyama's Hiya Oroshi, which traditionally has sea lions doing the same thing. So I think they've got the market cornered on adorable sake labels.
Well, that polar bear is pretty dang cute.
He is. That'll be in the show notes.
All right.
A new mascot. So this sake is wonderfully aromatic. Big, like airdrops of fruit. It is just so much. And it is Nama, so it's a little bit more, wild. It's a little bit more intense. It's really turned up here and there. They're going for it. They're embracing that. All of that nice melon, slightly overripe because it is that much more intense flavor. And then on the palate, it's delivering on that promise of all that fruit. There is a nice hit of acidity that balances it out very nicely. That's also not uncommon for your Nama Genshus to have a little bit of that acid bite when you sip it. This is almost like a textbook Namagenshu to me. It's like, this is something I would want to introduce somebody to when they were very curious about what that style tastes like. This really stands out to me. It's very bold. It's got so much like really welcoming fruit. It's very well balanced, and it is dangerously tasty.
Yeah, when you talk about drinking sake right out of the sake press, that's what Shibori Tate is really all about. It's like from the press into your glass. And that's a lot of people live for that style of sake.
It's very bold, very intense.
It's bold, juicy, zippy.
Yeah. And the thing is, when we were in Hokkaido last year, it was February. So it was Nama season, Shibori season. And most of the sake that people had was this like super big, super bold style. And by the first couple of days, like my tongue was getting tired. It was just, it was too much. It was way too much to have with every glass of sake. I needed something with some pasteurization to tone it down a little bit.
Yeah.
It was just like, it's like having conversations and everybody's yelling all the time, right? It was a good time though. It's very intense sake.
Yeah. I think it's important to mention though, when you have Shibori Tate, having it in Japan and having an exported version here in the States, don't you think there's a little bit of a difference there? A little bit nuanced difference?
There is, but I will say that I think they're getting better at it. I think that the importers are valuing the quality of their namas when they bring them over. And I'm seeing a lot more, I'm tasting a lot more sake that resembles more the way it was supposed to taste when it was shipped out. Not all the time, but occasionally you get one that's just like, wow, it's really nailing it. Otherwise, though, there was definitely a difference. It still has zip and juiciness and it's big, but it's a different kind of big.
Yeah. If you have 2 or 3 months of aging, even if you keep it ice cold, keep it sealed, keep it dark, you're going to lose a little bit of that true, unbridled, nama, unpasteurized wildness. And my experience has been in Japan during that season when the first pressings come out from the breweries. It is just insanely good. But again, you can't drink it every day or your palate will be destroyed.
It was rough. I mean, it's, as far as problems go, it's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem.
Oh my goodness, all this sake is too flavorful. Woe is me.
Woe is me.
But it's a thing.
Yeah. Well, now Hokkaido is back up on my list of destinations. Sapporo Snow Festival.
If you can handle the cold weather, I thoroughly recommend going in the winter. It is a wonderful experience.
Well, now you gave me the hot tip about the cleats for the bottom of my shoes and where to get them. And of course, I cannot wait to visit Sake Bar Kamada.
Tell them I sent you.
I will. All right. That was fabulous. Well, again, so excited to visit Hokkaido. We hope our listeners enjoyed our little sojourn up north to the Alaska of Japan. And we are so excited you took the time to check out Sake Revolution. We really do hope that you're enjoying our show. If you'd like to show your support for Sake Revolution, one of the best ways to help us out would be to follow us on Patreon. We have 2 levels of support. You can join us for $3 a month, and you can get a preview of what sakes are coming up in future episodes. And if you want to join us for $5 a month, you can take part in our live monthly Zoom, the first Wednesday of every month. We can't wait to meet you live and on Zoom and drink sake with you and talk about all things sake in person, and we're going to have a blast.
Yeah, our first Zoom is coming up. Tim, are you getting nervous?
No, I'm getting excited.
You're getting excited. Oh, great. Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. Another exciting thing that you can do is take a few minutes and leave us a written review on Apple Podcasts. You would not believe how much that sort of thing Really helps us out. Also, subscribe. Make sure you subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your family, get them to subscribe too. This way everybody's involved. We're all doing this together.
And if you would like to learn more about any of the topics we talked about or any of the sakes we tasted in today's episode, you need to visit our website, sakerevolution.com, and you can check out all the details in our show notes.
Mm-hmm. And if you have a sake question that you need answered, we want to hear it. We want to hear from you. Reach out to us. The email address is feedback@sakerevolution.com. So, until next time, please remember to keep drinking sake and kanpai.